we started going to the jazz band balls, which was in the old Oddfellows Hall opposite Sandy Bell's. Then, of course, there were various people, Davy Milne, etc., ran, Lenny D'Agostino, they ran all sorts of little groups, met in places to play records to each other. The bands, which I think it was a sort of classical time then, the Sandy Brown Band, the only one left is the gentleman who's downstairs that you must have a word with, Dizzy Jackson. That was Al Fairweather and Sandy, Bob Craig, Norrie Anderson, Stan Gregg, and Dizzy, of course. The other band, main band at the time, was Archie Semple's. Semple Brothers. John gave up, he played trumpet, etc., but he gave up a bit early, playing professionally. And Archie went on, he was a great Edmund Hall man at the time. And there was George Crockett on drums, there was Jimmy McIntyre on bass, a lovely man called Jimmy Mooney, who was the most lugubrious character you ever met, who played guitar. Drew Landell's on piano. I almost forgot him, Alec Welsh on trumpet. Welsh, of course, later ran his own band in London. I used to go and listen to them there. One of the great places to meet was the Blue Posts behind Oxford Street in the intervals, in which Sandy would stand with his glass of whiskey on one side and a glass of the water on the other and down them and one thing and another. So I, in a way, I could hear more of the old originals in London than they could here because they'd gone there. But of course, up here it was run on by people like McNair, Hamish, McGregor, etc., all sorts of people. There was a modern scene as well, of course. And I think Kenny Matheson might be a better man to talk to about that. I like both sides and listen to most of it. But to go back, oh yes, I did mention Jackie McFarlane. Jackie was he wasn't the world's greatest singer, but he was a great favourite with the crowd, a great personality. And he carried, in the days when it grew dark, after Sandy and went away and one thing another, and Archie, he humped his travelling compendium around to play records anywhere and everywhere. He would play jazz for people. One of his great pride was that he'd met Louis Armstrong when he played the Edinburgh Empire around about 1938 or something like that. He wasn't the world's greatest singer, but he was well liked, well admired. Certainly somebody that everybody remembers, and he's been dead 25 years, that's not bad. 25 minutes after I've gone, of me they will say, who? The pubs were very busy. The great dancing was very popular here. The old Pally and all the different ones. Well, they've just dinged down the Pally, unfortunately. A friend of mine gave up and died when they did that. He met his wife there. Pretty near everybody met their wives there. I didn't, but pretty near everybody else did. So everybody liked to dance, and everybody went out to entertain because the houses were cold. Coal was expensive. You wouldn't know about it. Everybody had coal fires. I'm amazed the place didn't burn down off now. And yes, if you want to know the atmosphere of the place, it was probably nearer New Orleans and turn of the century thing, because they had loads and loads of horses. Bags of horses in the streets, so the breweries and all sorts ran them. Nobody, of course, had motor cars. If you could afford to buy a second-hand bike, you were doing very well. Buying an instrument took you a long time to get the money for that. Buying a bike did as well. Everybody served apprenticeships because there was actually work to be had, not as much as there could have been. And one of the great entertainments was somewhere you could let your hair down, and that was a jazz band ball. The other great one that we all like to go to is get a ticket for the Musicians' Union Ball. That was fun too. Jazz band ball, we used to run them mainly anywhere they could find, but mainly in the up in Forest Road there, at the Oddfellows Hall, which was a Victorian establishment with iron pillars holding up the balcony, and there was nothing on the floor, just the floor. When you danced, the clouds of dust came up, and it really hadn't changed much since it was used for Bible meetings and God knows what. And you paid your money, and on the way up the entrance, which was a long sort of place with a concrete floor, they'd always have a couple of bouncers just in case. There was seldom the trouble you get now. Nobody pulled anybody pulling a knife. Anybody who jumped on got the police. They wouldn't have messed about. But you got the odd fights and things like that. People who come for trouble, not jazz fans. And amongst one of the bouncers was, of course, that well-known man, Mr. Thomas Sean Connery. And contrary to beliefs that he let somebody else do the bouncing, he was quite capable of doing it. He was a big, tough man. And yes, it's very nice to go to a jazz band ball in the Dickensian, some turn of the century meeting hall, and find that outside was somebody who became a world famous actor, bouncing people who didn't behave themselves. Yes, it was good fun. There was no license, of course. Then, of course, there was the jazz club, which we ran, the Condon Club, named after Indy Condon. And that was at the top of Victoria Street in the India buildings. Now, you walked up about 4 or 5 flights of stairs. And there was no license, of course. My wife and various others ran the little canteen thing. You got cups of coffee, camp, and that's not a... I meant camp coffee, and tea, and non-alcoholic fizz, and they all sat. The lucky ones had chairs, the old dining room chair, and the other ones sat in forms. There was no dancing, and you paid your money. I've still got the one of the posters hanging in my hall, and the Condon Club every Sunday, etc., etc. And the annual membership was 5 shillings, equivalent today to opposed to about, I don't know, 20 quid or something like that, which is neither here nor there. But 5 bob was a lot harder to find than 20 quid is now. And we used to go and listen to that. That is where Jackie came into his own. He was a great compere. And on the other side of Victoria Street, there was a Bible study place used to be there. And in these days, they took it very seriously. And at regular intervals, the caretaker would come up and say, "I've got them across again." And they'd turned up, you see, and they'd be saying, "You're playing that devil's music again." And Jackie used to go down and give them a long lecture about, no, it wasn't. The point was this was freeing the slaves' music, you see, and how blah, and he'd give them a little chat. And he had to do this about once a month. And they'd say, "Oh, well, we understand now, that's all right." That was for about 4 weeks, and they didn't understand. They started all over again. There was a time when, of course, all the talent was hiked off to London, because they needed it, as London does with talent from everything. And off they went, leaving bits of holes here and there, filled in to some extent by visiting stuff from people like Jack Hutting's band from Dundee. And there was an Aberdeen band that used to come down. Inverness, was it the Ness Driven Kings? I've forgotten the name. And there was people who play up from the borders. One of the great favourites playing here, the great band, there's only one of them left. He's a bass player too, and a great friend of Dizzy's, Colin Smith, Sycamore. And that was Mick Pott's Gateway Jazz Band from Carlisle. So we more or less incorporated them. They're near enough to be jocks, you know. Now you went down to the West End Cafe, Shandwick Place. Well, you'll see a door on the north side with coats of arms above it in plasterwork. West End Cafe was through there. You went through there, you bought coffee, and they'd have a band. And they had people like Joe Daniels from London, which was a professional Dixieland band, or Freddie Randall. You had people like wonderful pianist, who played during the week in the old Roadhouse at Maybury, and that was Percy Pegg, English gentleman who lived here for years and years and years, a wonderful pianist. In fact, can I tell you a story? Well, Percy used to go on holiday for 3 weeks, and George Crockett, who was the drummer with Archie, he used to get the spot, you see, and he'd get in there for 3 weeks. Well, George was slightly neurotic. He was a lovely man, great, good journalist for the Daily Express. And he was also a very fine drummer. However, he was also a bit jumpy and he could be very easily depressed, you see. And Jimmy Mooney was the guitarist, and Jimmy was a saturnine and rather taciturn man, given to gloom. And one night, after finish of the 3 weeks, George is standing at the corner of Lothian Road there, just outside the hotel. And in these days, it all looked as if it had been built of impacted soot. They hadn't cleaned it for years. And there was a station there, of course. And he's standing there, and the drizzle was coming down, and all he wanted was a cab. This is about 2 in the morning. So, because it wasn't like today. It was empty, you know. Sunday morning, he's waiting there patiently. And eventually, all of us, suddenly there's a voice says something in his ear, and poor old George leaps about 4 feet in the air and says, oh, what man, what was it? Oh, it's you, Jimmy. Hello, George. Oh, he says, hello, George, how are things? Oh, George says, terrible. He says, I've given up he's brought back. And I mean, George didn't need the money. That wasn't the thing. He didn't have something to do. He wasn't playing. He said, I don't know what I'm going to do for the next couple of weeks. Terrible. No, there's no work, you see. And Jimmy said, yes. And Jimmy is standing there in this black, rather like the old Sandeman Sherry ad, and this great black coat, plastic coat gleaming in the rain, a big black hat, a big black umbrella. And he says, you know what it is, George? George says, no, man, what is it, man? He said, you and I, George, we've had our day. Poor old George. Took him about a week to get over that. Anyway, I'm sorry I babbled on long enough. They did one or two things, and I preferred the Borders, and they used to go down. Oh, they used to play down at the Carlisle, and there was a marvellous man, whose name escapes me for a second, quite mad, who used to run gigs all around the place, you see, and he used to hire the market hall at Carlisle. And he used to try and heat this place by these tiny little radiators which were around the room. And they were up on this big stage, you see, and he used to run all these mad things down there. So that was quite good going down there. He had the Melly Band. The Melly Band used to come up, you know, the McMulligan's band. They used to come up and play down there. And he said, he used to get drunk, this guy, and he used to recite Kipling's If to the crowd. And George and Mick had rather odd senses of humour. And on one occasion, they said, go on, how about a recitation? So this guy gets up and he starts to do the recitation. And of course, the mob just want to dance. So they were starting to throw things more or less, and George said, throw the chairs at them. They were handing them back to the things that went on here were in some of the travelling bands.